It's another week, another set of bad actors, malicious files, and compromised systems. On today's show, we're going to be talking about some of the intel being shared by our awesome InfoSec community, and a huge thank you to all those folks that take the time to share their knowledge with the rest of us. If you enjoy listening in on these intel chats and aren't in our community forum yet, then you should join the conversation. Lots of information is being shared there, and you will get it in real time. You can join us at community.limacharlie.io. And as always, for these conversations, I'm joined by the one and only Matt Bromley. How are you doing today, sir?
And as always, Chris, it's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm doing well. We've got some cool stuff lined up. Actually, I was taking a look at some of the content before we got started. And one of the first things we're going to talk about is one of my favorite articles from the past week. I've stumbled upon it at least 3 times, had it sent to me at least 5 times. And I'm super happy about it. But I'm always happy to be here. We got some cool stuff that we cover, that we talk about. The world's a crazy place right now. It is middle or almost end of June 2025. And safe to say the past 6 months have just been a wild roller coaster. And who knows what's coming next. But nonetheless, we're here and we're still doing the good thing. So I'm having fun.
Yeah. Everything is on fire, isn't it?
Sometimes literally. But in other cases, it's been interesting. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and I do agree. This first one's a great one to start with. Thai police conducted a major raid on the Anti-Holiday Hotel in central Pattaya late on Monday night, June 16th, uncovering a joint operation involving both ransomware distribution and illegal gambling. Acting on a tip, officers initiated a floor-by-floor sweep of the 8-story building and discovered 2 distinct criminal setups. One floor had been converted into an illicit casino, complete with poker tables, gambling chips, and around 20 foreign nationals actively gambling. On the 8th floor, investigators found a separate but related cybercrime operation being run by 6 Chinese nationals. According to police reports, these individuals were not end-level hackers, but operatives paid specifically to target Chinese companies with ransomware infections. Authorities seized 9 laptops and 15 mobile phones during the arrests, which they believe were being used to distribute malicious links. Thai police described the suspects as employees within a larger gang structure, suggesting a level of organizational hierarchy and cross-functional collaboration between different facets of the operation. With gambling largely illegal in Thailand, the presence of a fully operational casino was already a major violation, but the additional ransomware angle points to a hybridized model of organized crime. So this sounds like somebody got caught out and it's going to hurt.
This sounds like a wild time in a hotel. I got to tell you that much. Chris, I think the thing that first caught my interest here, obviously, was, I guess, the takedown of ransomware operators, perhaps. But even more interesting was, like, I have this idea. You know, I kind of always like to visualize and storyboard these things. And I have this idea of these guys getting this tip of illegal gambling setup. So they roll in there expecting to find illegal gambling tables. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe this was actually a tip of like the top floor, or it was being done on the top floor of the hotel. It was the 8th floor of the hotel, and it was an 8-story building. So it's the top floor, number 1. Number 2, they had bought the whole thing out. And I just have this crazy, idea of like, oh, we're going in, we're going to go bust a gambling ring. And that's what you do. And you set up and you kind of prepare for this gambling takedown. And then as you're in the middle of doing that, you're like, wait, what are you guys doing? And it's like, we're just running some ransomware over here. And it's just like, wait, what? What did we stumble into here? I read a comment somewhere that said this was actually not a surprise to someone, as some of these lower level or independent or contractor-based threat actors had been seen kind of stemming into multiple different industries. And Chris, I think what we're really seeing, I think you're going to cover this in just a moment here as well. But what I really think we're seeing is like just how commoditized and organized the idea of ransomware has become. That like if you walked into a room and you saw a poker table and in the next room of the same suite was a blackjack table, you'd be like, oh, illegal casino operation. Got it. Well, for organized crime, there's a poker table and then there's a set of computers doing ransomware. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's what we do. Like that's the stuff that we do. So it's just, I think, part of it. But as always, I'm a fan of when we are talking about takedown activity, because that means there's less bad people in the world doing bad things.
And yeah, we talk about it a ton, but there's like all the, as a service model for the cybercrime industry. And yeah, it makes it super accessible for people who are just willing to, cross those moral lines and perform these actions. They don't necessarily need the technical expertise, just some laptops and some phones and, the willingness to do so.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, was the picture taken shows these guys cross-legged on the floor behind the pillar in front of the police with their laptops open in front of them. One dude rocking the serious heavyweight here has two laptops, both of them with the default Windows 11 background. I mean, come on, dude. Like, couldn't even amp up. Everyone else has what looks like a custom background, except one of them, I
All the
think, is
eye candy. This one guy's like,
However, the picture of the mobile phones are there and everything. I do also want to give a little bit of a hat tip, and I don't think you're going to cover this next, but a little bit of a hat tip towards Graham Cluley, who brought this article together, where he actually tried to book a room at the hotel. I think jokingly, he tried to book a room at the hotel afterwards. And he was like, "Well, it looks like the hotel's sold out," and I love it. I love the flow of events here. But
all right. So in total, around 24 nationals were arrested during the raid, representing a mix of Chinese, Vietnamese, Singaporean, Cambodian, and Myanmar citizens. This diversity highlights how regional crime networks are now interlinking across national lines. A photo released by authorities shows several of the arrested suspects seated on the ground, heads down, surrounded by confiscated digital equipment and mobile devices. It's unclear whether hotel staff were complicit or simply unaware, but the event has clearly disrupted normal operations. Hotel booking sites have already listed the anti-holiday hotel as unavailable for reservations. If the suspects are convicted, Thai media reports that they will face deportation and permanent bans from re-entering the country. This case underscores a growing convergence between cybercrime and traditional criminal enterprises, where digital tactics are used to finance or augment physical world operations like illegal gambling. Law enforcement efforts targeting one part of such networks are now frequently yielding multi-million-dollar criminal evidence, from ransomware toolkits to poker chips, burner phones, and fraudulent IDs. The integration of ransomware into organized crime is no longer speculative. This raid makes clear that the lines between cyber and physical criminal economies are increasingly blurred. Yeah, there you have it. Set up your gambling tables and start ransoming hospitals.
Hey guys, you want me to deal you in? No. Hang on, I got a ransomware case launching right here. 1 second. All right. Matt's gonna sit out a few rounds. He's got to launch some malware.
All right, this one's a little close to home. Canada's National Cybersecurity Agency has confirmed that a Chinese state-sponsored group known as Salt Typhoon successfully targeted a Canadian telecommunications company earlier this year, exploiting a Cisco vulnerability. The attack occurred in mid-February and involved 3 network devices at the unnamed company. The attackers exploited several CVEs, including a known privilege escalation flaw in Cisco's iOS XE web UI, to retrieve the running configuration files from all 3 devices. In at least one case, the threat actor modified configuration files to establish a GRE tunnel, which would allow them to collect traffic traversing the network. Salt Typhoon is part of a broader Chinese cyber espionage campaign that has been ongoing since at least last year, targeting telecommunication carriers globally. According to the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, the goal of these attacks is to monitor, alter, and exfiltrate network traffic, or potentially pivot deeper into internal infrastructure. While the initial campaign focused on telecoms, Canadian authorities now believe the group may be expanding its targeting scope. Indicators linked to Salt Typhoon have been observed in other sectors, suggesting a wider campaign beyond just telecommunications.
Woo! Getting a little close to home there, Chris.
I know, and Canada has quite the history of our telecoms being targeted by Chinese threat actors, so always makes me a little anxious to hear about stuff like this, but I know we got some good folks working on it. So
yeah, well, here we go. Salt Typhoon at it again, right? The adversary's taking advantage of a 2-year-old vulnerability here now, CVE 2023, as you called out. For anyone who's curious, and I'm just checking here really quick, that thing was announced, I apologize, October 16th, 2023. So it's a year and a half old, not 2 years old just yet. But I would still like to point out, patch. But nonetheless, interestingly enough, kind of tapping into the Cisco iOS XE web UI here. We may have actually talked about this one before, Chris.
I do think we did. I remember vaguely.
It feels familiar because there was 2 years ago, there was a POC piece of code that was POC does not stand for piece of code, but it does now. But there was a POC released out there that is an easy Python script that anybody can just go and run if they need to, and makes it super easy for the threat actors to utilize and weaponize, and then subsequently, of course, finding vulnerable targets. I think this kind of speaks again towards nation states not shying away from older vulnerabilities if they can. They don't need a lot of folks. I'll dispel this myth quickly. A lot of folks come out the gate thinking that nation states come armed to the teeth with 0 days and the world's most advanced code and malware. And I'm like, hey, if a 1.5 year, 2-year-old vulnerability gets them in the door, then that's all they need, right? It's really easy. In that case, they're able to modify, Chris, as you mentioned, the configuration files to establish a GRE tunnel, which boom, now they're in and they're able to collect traffic. And I think further advice for folks to say that, look, it's not always just opportunistic or maybe lone wolf attackers that utilize these things. Sometimes it is adversaries that are of great capacity and great resources to rope these types of vulnerabilities or the exploits into their toolkit and then use them to take advantage of some pretty big targets. So regardless of, enterprise size, still leaving some of these vulnerabilities out there really shouldn't be happening. And we don't want to point fingers and say, patch your stuff. Because when you tell someone to patch a 2-year-old vulnerability, the assumption is they didn't patch it in the first place. But unfortunately, that's really what we're saying here. So for anyone who might be in the telecommunications industry or is experiencing any sort of anxiety about what Salt Typhoon might be up to next, this is recent as of February 2025. So we're still pretty recent in the overall threat actor history. Patch your stuff, everyone, because simple doors like this should not be the way for adversaries to get in.
Mm-hmm. Might even be worth looking to see what the indicators are and going to check your logs to see if
100%.
there's any traces of that. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, so the findings of this breach align with global threat researchers who have tracked Salt Typhoon exploiting Cisco vulnerabilities to target over 1,000 network devices worldwide. The group has breached major telecommunication networks not just in Canada, but also in the U.S., including AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, Viasat, and Lumen Technologies, as well as carriers in Italy, South Africa, and Thailand. Some of the access data reportedly includes sensitive call metadata, private communications, and even information related to law enforcement surveillance requests, making it clear that high-value intelligence gathering is a core objective. Cybersecurity analysts are calling Salt Typhoon's campaign a critical moment in the escalation of state-backed cyber threats. Despite growing international scrutiny, including last fall's reports that first brought attention to this group, Salt Typhoon appears undeterred. Canadian authorities anticipate that Chinese cyber actors will almost certainly continue targeting Canadian organizations, particularly telecom services and their clients, for at least the next 2 years. As a response, the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity is advising organizations to prioritize the security of edge infrastructure and stay vigilant regarding known Chinese APT tactics and associated indicators. I can't help but wonder, given all the geopolitical stuff going on, if this uptake is related to Canada's position of looking for new trading partners now, or sort of realigning their trade alliances, and in the Chinese having a very good reason to understand where our politicians are thinking and how we're trying to move in the global economy.
I would not shy away from that thought, and I think that's a very apt observation. In fact, everyone out there, all the varying degrees of global economics and everything like that are going on right now, I would definitely think that would be an issue. Chris, I think that's probably one of the best observations out there. Is, we're going to talk in just a moment about how an uptick in cyber activity might be kind of generated from geopolitical tensions or even warlike activities, but it can sometimes be trade deals and economic negotiations that kick these things off. And sometimes the object is telecommunications. Sometimes the telecommunications are a path to other things. Sometimes they can be both. Understanding like, hey, just because I'm not in the crosshairs of a particular geopolitical thing that's happening doesn't mean your organization is not victim to some other auxiliary thing that might be happening. As Chris mentioned, like the world of global trade is being kind of turned on its head a little bit, mostly because of actions coming out of the United States. That causes threat actors to act on behalf of governments who care 5, 10, 15 years in the future, 20, 50 years in the future. And the time for economic espionage and intellectual property espionage and whatnot starts now. So you can figure out what people are going to be doing in the future. And yes, 100%, be vigilant, especially at times like these when there's a lot of turmoil. There's a lot of noise that says, look over here, when there's actually some easy wins over there.
Yeah. Yeah. So continuing along that thread, up next, the Department of Homeland Security has issued a National Terrorism Advisory System Bulletin warning of an elevated risk of cyber attacks and potentially violent extremism in response to escalating geopolitical tensions between the U.S. and Iran. The bulletin came on the heels of Operation Midnight Hammer, a coordinated U.S. military strike on 3 Iranian nuclear facilities in Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. The operation reportedly involved more than 125 U.S. military aircraft and has drawn promises of retaliation from Tehran. According to DHS, Iran's historical pattern of leveraging both state-sponsored and proxy cyber actors during moments of heightened conflict suggests a renewed wave of cyber intrusions could be imminent. The advisory specifically highlights the threat posed by pro-Iranian hacktivists and Iran-backed advanced persistent threat groups. These groups may escalate cyber attacks on U.S. government infrastructure, critical services, and election-related assets in the coming weeks. DHS further noted Iran's stated objective of targeting U.S. officials believed to be connected to the 2020 killing of IRGC commander Qassem Soleimani in scenarios where Iran's leadership issues a religious decree or fatwa endorsing retaliatory action. DHS believes the risk of self-radicalized domestic violent extremists could increase, raising the stakes for both physical and cyber homeland security. Man, this gets heavy sometimes.
Yeah, I think this was something I wanted to make sure we touched on this week, especially for any defenders, analysts, folks out there who are trying to figure out what's coming as a result of this. Understand that geokinetic activities out there in the world do spawn and further cyber activities as well. We only need to look to Ukraine to see this as true, right? When the conflict in Ukraine started, the uptick in cyber activities, both targeting them and targeting kind of friendly nations and stuff, was expected, but also for some organizations kind of a little daunting, a little too much. And you can expect this to be the case, especially when you have one country declaring war or declaring some sort of retaliatory effects against another. And especially with the situation that typically happens in that region of the world where it's not just 1v1, it's often sides get chosen. You can expect cyber threat actors to launch out in retaliation and do it with full government support. Now, Chris, that doesn't always mean the government is going to kind of, call these guys up and say, hey, here's the targets I want you to go after, right? What it means is they're not going to suffer any punishment by having that happen, right? We're not going to have anything, come about, right? A DOJ indictment at this point would be laughing stock or toilet paper, for lack of a better term. But you will see this type of occur, and sometimes it can be politically driven. Sometimes you'll see a lot of like website defacements, DDoS attacks, things like that kind of align with like, I'm going to bring your thing down, right? And in other cases, you'll see an uptick in maybe critical infrastructure attacks or at least attempts, things that may seem to cause damage against an organization. Things that may seem to cause some sort of havoc or wreak peril, so like we're going to bring down an electrical plant or something because that's what you did to us. So kind of like an eye for an eye retaliation. Mm-hmm. I think some of the other warnings that are being called out is threat actors might have implants already in certain places. I'm not going to mention, or I should say, I'm not going to dive into like sleeper cells and things because that's been a big hot news topic here in the States recently. But you might have cyber threat actors who have implants or presence in some locations and then decide to use those in a much more negative and destructive manner. I think it's something to watch out for. But overall, like if anyone is trying to figure out how to weather the storm in situations like this, and you find yourself either in associated industries, maybe previously targeted by Iranian threat actors, or they're on your list or you're on their target list, watch out because there might be a renewed sense of vigor amongst those groups that causes them to reach out with a little more, I don't know, maybe tenacity is the best way to phrase it.
Mm-hmm. So the DHS bulletin also references several disrupted Iranian-linked plots on U.S. soil since 2020, underscoring the threats are not limited to digital vectors. Groups such as Hamas, Lebanese Hezbollah, and the Houthis have all issued media statements inciting violence against U.S. personnel and assets, in part due to Israel's earlier offensive against nuclear facilities in the region. This convergence of geopolitical flashpoints in the Middle East appears to be contributing to a multi-front threat environment with implications both abroad and domestically. Charming Kitten, also known as APT-42, is among the key threat actors cited. The group, which is believed to be linked to Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, has a record of targeting politically sensitive email accounts in the U.S., including those associated with the 2024 election. APT-42 is also engaged in phishing and social engineering campaigns against Israel and American targets, especially during the fallout from Israel's 2023 military campaign in Gaza. DHS is urging organizations to adopt CISA's cybersecurity recommendations, such as implementing multi-factor authentication, reporting suspicious activity, and securing remote access infrastructure given the current threat climate. So yeah, folks, we're up in the DEFCON level. Just stay vigilant, and hopefully the world returns to some sanity at some point.
And be careful out there.
Yeah. Okay, this last one I thought was clever. It's not technically super fancy, but it's quite clever. So security researchers have confirmed that recent social engineering campaigns exploiting Zoom are the work of Blue Noroff, a North Korean state-sponsored APT group known for targeting financial entities, particularly in the cryptocurrency and online gambling sectors. Well, duh. The attack follows a repeating pattern. Victims are lured into a Zoom call where they experience fabricated audio problems, prompting them to execute a malicious code under the guise of resolving the issues. These campaigns rely heavy on impersonation, often mimicking legitimate contacts and corporate infrastructure to increase credibility. One high-profile incident involved Eugene Viborov, founder and CEO of Ability AI, who was nearly compromised after being invited to what appeared to be a legitimate Zoom meeting. The attackers simulated technical difficulties, then directed him to a phony Zoom help page that instructed him to run terminal commands. When he refused and suggested switching to Google Meet, their entire Telegram communication stopped and disappeared, highlighting their operational discipline and evasiveness. A similar case in late May involved a Canadian online gambling employee who unknowingly executed a script disguised as a Zoom audio fix. That script launched a chain of attacks, ultimately deploying InfoStealer malware and a persistence loader. So this is clever, right? Yeah. Like, you know, somebody reaches out, you get a call on the calendar, you go to log in, audio's not working. They DM you a link like that looks like a Zoom help page. It's, oh, this is common. Just run this command. Like I could see a lot of people getting caught in this one.
Yeah, this is one that actually, when I read through this, I was like, I think we talked about this maybe last week or the week before, where I was like, man, these North Korean threat actors are really like ramping up that whole kind of interview, live chat, deep fake style thing. It's like they can't wait to get on camera. And it's obviously not them, it's a deep fake, but I find this to be such a fascinating trend of North Korean driven events where it's very much geared towards AI led social engineering, getting people to run malicious commands, being very upfront kind of about meeting invites, interviews, job credentials, LinkedIn, all kinds of stuff where it's like very much in your face, but a lot of it deals with, I think, like the normal flow of events that we're used to seeing, right? Where, you know, hey, I need you to join a Zoom call, do this, do that, and things like that. And it's just like, oh, okay, yeah, you know, I'm used to this behavior, right? Yeah. Oh, your audio is not working. Yeah, we've had that problem. Here's a command to run. And just these types of things where if you're not a cyber or technical professional at all, you'll just blindly do these things like, oh, okay, I see what's going on. So they're really trying to subvert trust.
Yeah, and especially in those moments where you're trying to make everything work, right? There's some urgency. Like you don't want to be the guy whose mic doesn't work, so you're trying to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also, I think, a fascinating like use of a legitimate technology as well. You know, where we can use Zoom. We don't have to build a C2 infrastructure. We don't have to, design a meeting app or anything like that. We're just going to use Zoom and schedule a legitimate meeting so it passes by all firewalls. It passes the sniff test of this is a legitimate platform, right? Nothing against them, Chris. There's a video conferencing platform out there. Let me see if it still exists. But there's a video conferencing platform out there called Blue Jeans, if I'm not mistaken. Was it Blue Jeans? I think. Let me see. Yeah, Blue Jeans, video conferencing. Blue Jeans by Verizon was a company for cloud video conferencing. I see that they've been defunct as of March 2024. But where I'm going with this is years ago during the height of COVID, someone sent me an invite. It was like, hey, will you join my Blue Jeans meeting? And I was like, that looks like spam. Boom. Ended up being a legitimate customer call. And I was like, didn't know that was a service, right? So even piggybacking off of Zoom is just, everyone knows what Zoom is.
A lot of credibility, really well.
So hats off to the threat actors for finding a really unique delivery mechanism and then utilizing kind of the legitimate infrastructure that is Zoom to make this happen.
Yeah. So the depth of these attacks became more apparent in a case documented by Huntress in early June. An employee at a cryptocurrency foundation was invited to a Zoom meeting featuring deepfake videos of senior executives. Again, audio issues were engineered to push the victim into downloading a fake Zoom extension via Telegram. The extension was actually an Apple script that fetched additional payloads, checked for the presence of a Rosetta 2, and disabled bash history logging, a clear sign the attackers aimed to avoid detection during post-exploitation activity. The victim's machine ended up infected with a suite of 8 malicious binaries, including the XS Screen Keylogger, CryptoBot InfoStealer, and RootTroy version 4 backdoor. Researchers from Field Effect and Huntress have attributed these operations to Blue Noroff, also known under aliases like KG Chameleon and Stardust Kolima. The group has consistently targeted cryptocurrency and financial institutions as part of North Korea's broader strategy to circumvent international sanctions and acquire hard currency. Analysis of the infrastructure used in these campaigns uncovered over 200 domains linked to fake Zoom extensions, suggesting that the attacks are part of a larger ongoing campaign. The combination of deepfakes, domain infrastructure, and platform impersonation marks a significant evolution in Blue Noroff's tradecraft, specifically its use of video conferencing platforms as an attack vector. Yeah, so that's wild. The call you're on, too, is a deepfake of your boss telling you to run that script.
I know. I mean, just wild, right? Wild. Yeah. Just a really clever approach towards getting someone to execute some commands for you. So again, I'm just, Chris, kind of always in awe of what these threat actors come up with, what they're able to do. And then we also have to include like what they find success with. We probably are learning about this attack, this type of attack, or this vector, if you will, because they had some success with it before a firm finally got a hold of it. So just always kind of impressed with the really interesting things that are happening and stuff like that, Yeah.
Stay vigilant, friends. All right, sir. Here we are. I don't even know what episode we're on, but it's another one in the books, and I'm sure we'll do another one next week.
I'm sure of it. It's always a pleasure to get on the phone with you, Chris. Thank you so much. Phone. We're on a video chat ourselves.
We're on a North Korean APT platform.
I hope the two of us have been speaking to the real version of each other, but assuming we have been, it's been fun being here. If not, man, technology's been amazing, and it's been great chatting with whatever version of Chris this is. Great seeing you, man. Take care.
All right. Take care, sir. Bye.
Better.